All righty. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes, yes. Okay, great, great, great. All right, I thought I disabled, just give me a minute. I am Zooming and Facebooking at the same time. And with Zoom, I thought I disabled the waiting room, but people are still asking to get in. I think actually, maybe not. I think we are good. All right, and hey, Linda, I'm glad you could hear, and Hillary can't do video, but glad you could at least hear. And all right, well, before we begin, let's both in Zoom and Facebook, feel free to type in where you're Zooming from or where you're going on, where you where you're participating from. And let me actually in Facebook expand so I can see the comments here. And all right, well. All right, so let's see. We have Rachel from Boca in Florida. All right, and Linda from Nambia. Just also to let everyone know, it's storming here, so hopefully we keep power. But if everything, if the broadcast suddenly ends, you know what probably happened. So, but hopefully that's not the case. So it's raining pretty hard, and but. All right, so let's see. So we got again Linda from Nambia, Rachel, great to be here, great to have you, and Tebow from Southern Illinois, and Hillary from Thomasville, Colorado, and Tina, not too far away from me, in Charleston, South Carolina, Linda, the Florida West Coast, and then Sally from Somerset, United Kingdom, and then someone from Columbus, Ohio, and Lizzie from Nigeria, and then someone from India. It looks like someone might have unmuted themselves in Zoom. So now let me see if I could figure out who that is. All right. All right, so Emma from Ireland, and then Sue from London, Jan from England. Wow, we really have a diverse group here, many different places. Dan from Auburn, and then Barbara from Sweden, and then we have some from Anne from Hong Kong. All right, and that's just Zoom. So let's let me look at Facebook here. Let's see, Facebook. We have. Hey, we have Stay in Your Lane. How you doing? She was in my 21-day challenge. And then Haiti, hello. And Gabriella from El Paso, Texas. Shauna from Florida. And then Vivian from Belleville, Ontario. Gabriella from New York City. Natalie from South Florida. Alina from Romania. Wendy from Connecticut. Haiti from Ohio, and then we have Priscilla from Brazil, and then someone from Hendersonville, Tennessee, someone from Anne from California, Lori from, not sure if Louisiana or Los Angeles, she put LA, but anyway, so thank you everyone for attending, and all right, so yeah, we actually not as we have I was expecting a bigger crowd from the Facebook group than Zoom, and Zoom right now we have 52 people. With the group we only have 12 people, so hopefully we're more active when we have our upcoming challenge, which I'm going to briefly mention here. And Sahar from she's from Toronto, and she also was on our 21-day challenge in June. All right, so some quick announcements. The main announcement I'm going to make is that Monday, many of you know, but I'm sure not everyone, that we have a 5-day free upcoming challenge / training. So it's on accelerated thyroid healing, and it will be again Monday. So week of starting 8/17 and through Friday. So there'll be, so you don't have to be on Facebook to participate. You do need to opt in because you will be emailed a video lesson as well as an assignment. There will also be 2 90-minute Q&A sessions, kind of like we're doing now, just except it'll just be Q&A, and it will, you know, where today I'm giving a little bit of a presentation, but yeah. So again, you could join on either Zoom or through the Facebook group. And again, there's our Facebook group, which reached 600 after I was under 600, like I don't know, like 80 when I sent out the email today, and now I think last it's been like 610 or 615. So, and I just started the group's about a month old, but I just started inviting people last Friday, so we weren't letting anybody in. I had just one of my moderators in and myself. So not too bad for, I guess this would be day number 9. And, you know, for those who are on Zoom, I understand not everybody's on Facebook. So for those who are not on Facebook, that's fine. But those who are on Facebook, feel free to join. And then with that challenge, there's also going to be prizes for participation. And to register, if you're not already registered, you can visit this website, which is rapidthyroidhealing.com. And obviously, I'm not promising in 5 days that will heal your thyroid. I think most people really understand that, but just, yeah, it's just to give you just direction, and not just the goal is not to overload you with a lot of information. The videos on average are 10 to 20 minutes. On Monday, it's a little bit different. Monday, there's actually an extended version of the video that's like 25 minutes, but then there's one that's 17 minutes. I talk a little bit about symptom management, and that's an extended version. Not everybody wants to know how to use, you know, natural methods to manage the symptoms, but for those who do, there's that option. But yeah, like I said, it's not just to give tons of information. I mean, there will be, of course, good information, but just really give you like 10, 20 minutes of daily lessons and an assignment to help you take action. And then I'll be doing some random Facebook Lives as well for those who are part of the Facebook group. But as I mentioned, those who aren't part of the Facebook group, I'll be doing the 2 90-minute Q&A sessions through Zoom. All right, so let's start out. And before starting out, just, okay, Lori is from Los Angeles, not Louisiana. Okay, I was just making sure, just always double check. Should never know if I lose audio, especially with this weather, but I assume that everybody would be typing in the chat. So, all right, so many of you are familiar with Triad of Autoimmunity, and also I should say that the focus of not only today, but the challenge is it's not going to be just for people with Graves' disease and Hashimoto's, but most people with hyperthyroidism have Graves' disease. Most people with hypothyroidism have Hashimoto's. So a lot of it will relate to those people with thyroid autoimmunity. But again, if you have a non-autoimmune thyroid condition, and I hate when people do that on Zoom, drawing. All right, anyway, I'm gonna let it go for now, but what was I gonna say? So anyway, if you have toxic, thank you for the person who, yeah, deleted it. So I'm still I won't say a Zoom newbie, just because you know, I've been Zooming now since, I guess, April, so I'm not brand new, but still, yeah, I can't say I'm an expert. It would take me probably a minute or two to figure out how to. I've deleted those drawings like once or twice, but anyway, so if you have a non-autoimmune hyperthyroid or hypothyroid condition, a lot of this information will apply. The same thing with the challenge too, but you will hear me talk about Graves', Hashimoto's a lot, because again, that's the majority of people with these conditions. So Triad of Autoimmunity obviously applies to those with Graves' and Hashimoto's. So there is a genetic predisposition. But the good news is 2 other factors are even more important when it comes to the development of thyroid autoimmunity, as well as trying to get someone in a state of remission. And so that's exposure to environmental trigger. which of course is the focus of this presentation. And then an increase in intestinal permeability, which is is a leaky gut. Sorry, I forgot also I am recording in Zoom. So that's also when doing 2 broadcasts, one in Zoom and one in Facebook. Facebook automatically records, but yeah, there have been times when I forgot to press to record in Zoom. So these are the 3 factors with the Triad of Autoimmunity. Again, you need that genetic predisposition, but not everybody with a genetic predisposition will develop whatever condition they're predisposed to developing. So for example, if you have an identical twins, and I've known identical twins that like where one has Hashimoto's, for example, and the other one does not have Hashimoto's. And that's the case with even identical twins. So they both will have, the same genetics, but that doesn't mean that both will develop Hashimoto's in this situation. So, and that's proof that environment is a big factor. So let's discuss the 4 categories of triggers. So there is food, there's stress, there's chemicals, and there are infections. So we're gonna dive into each of these a little bit more. And of course, with the challenge, this is, as I mentioned in the email, this is gonna be a brief presentation, so it's not gonna be too long. Really, the focus is to answer questions, but I did wanna give a little bit of a presentation. Oh, and be aware of hidden triggers, which I'm not going to get into here, but if you attend the challenge, I will, we'll talk about hidden triggers. So food. So gluten, of course, most people are familiar with gluten being a potential trigger of not just thyroid autoimmunity, but other autoimmune conditions, dairy, corn, some of the more common triggers. Now I put a question mark with sugar and salt. With sugar, so of course you want to avoid refined sugars. You want to, even natural sugars, you don't want to overdo. But sugar does, as far as I know, and I've done a good amount of research, sugar doesn't directly trigger autoimmunity. However, it can cause other factors that could lead to autoimmunity. So if someone eats a lot of sugar, like of course can cause blood sugar imbalances, which could be a factor that can affect the immune system. Candida overgrowth, which I'll actually mention briefly soon. So that's also another factor. Salt, on the other hand, there is research on salt and autoimmunity, about salt potentially causing or exacerbating autoimmunity. So it doesn't mean that, like I recommend for my patients to eat natural sea salts. So it's so if someone's eating natural sea salt, like let's say half a teaspoon per day, that's not a problem. But just especially if you're eating a lot of processed foods, of course, they add salt to everything, and then if you're having refined salt on top of that. So, and I forget, I might have an article on this, but I definitely talk about this in my book, Hashimoto's Triggers. So for those who are not too familiar with me, I have 2 books, one on hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease, Natural Treatment Solutions for Hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease, which was released in 2011, revised in 2013. And then 2018, I released the book, Hashimoto's Triggers. So if you're interested in diving even deeper into triggers, then I would recommend highly, of course, I'm going to be biased. So of course, I'm going to recommend my book, Hashimoto's Triggers, but honestly, it's a, yeah, anyway, I was going to say it's a great book, which again, of course, I'm going to think it's great, but go on Amazon, check out the reviews. It's, there is a paperback version, but the Kindle version is only $6, $5.99, and gives now that does give a lot of information. It's a really thick book. You don't have to read it from front to back, but just warning you, for those who purchase it, especially the paperback book, it's a little bit intimidating when someone gets it in the mail. But like I said, it's not designed necessarily to read it from front to cover, even though I'm sure there are some people that do that. But yeah, so and then this last bullet point, food triggers versus food sensitivities, and I think people are already typing in their questions, so feel free to do that. It'll be a few minutes until the presentation is done, but if you have questions either in Zoom or Facebook group, just and Zoom, we're going to just stick with the chat, and of course Facebook, that's the only option. But just if I start unmuting people and asking, it'll slow us down. I want to try to get through as many questions as I can, and whenever I do these, I'm willing to go like about an hour and a half, like until 2:30 or so my time, Eastern time. And I'm not 100% sure, but my guess is I'll easily have enough questions to last me until then. And many times I don't get to all the questions, so that's why I'll be sticking with the chat feature. But this last bullet point here, food triggers versus food sensitivities. What I mean by this is not you could be sensitive to any food. Like you could be sensitive to broccoli, for example, but not every food sensitivity is a food trigger. Now we could argue that if you're sensitive to a certain food, it could cause inflammation and can prevent you from healing. But like gluten seems to be more of in some cases, a direct trigger of autoimmunity. I haven't seen anything where broccoli is a direct trigger, or avocados, healthier foods. And then there's stress. So our adrenals were designed to handle acute stress situations, and chronic stress is a big problem, and especially this year. This has, of course, been a crazy year. And so, and of course, I know there are some people that stress maybe isn't a big factor. I talk with, some of my patients that I talk with them, and I have them fill out a health history, and they'll put a low score. I asked them to rate their, to take a guess on their stress levels and stress handling on a scale of 1 to 10. And some people for stress levels will put like a 1. And maybe sometimes that's the case. Maybe sometimes they're underestimating their stress levels or overestimating their stress handling, or both. So, but either way, if you're dealing with a lot of stressors, you won't be able to eliminate all of them. And as a result, you will need to work on improving your stress handling skills. And again, I will talk a little bit more about this during the challenge. And so chemicals. So there are tens of thousands of chemicals on our environment. And of course, I can't list all of them here. So just some of the main ones. Heavy metals, mercury. Of course, there are others as well. There's, lead, aluminum, cadmium, arsenic, xenoestrogens such as bisphenol A or BPA, phthalates. Many of you know that BPA-free isn't completely safe, just because there's usually, if something's BPA-free, there's other plasticizers, other xenoestrogens. Glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. And so that, I don't know if that could be a direct trigger of autoimmunity, but it can cause dysbiosis, can affect the gut flora. And of course, you need a healthy gut in order to have a healthy immune system. Mycotoxins from molds, and let's not forget about electronic pollution. And then there's infection. So bacteria such as H. pylori and Borrelia burgdorferi is associated with Lyme disease. Viruses such as Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, parasites such as Blastocystis hominis, yeast overgrowth. So when a lot of people talk about Candida overgrowth, but there's other types of yeast as well. Candida albicans is the most well-known yeast. Can there be more than one trigger? So most of you probably know the answer to this. So it's not only can you have more than one trigger, but it's common to have multiple triggers. So an example, someone could have a gluten sensitivity and infection. So again, with gluten, sometimes it could get tricky because it doesn't, gluten, gluten causes a leaky gut in everybody. It doesn't mean that it's a direct trigger, which I think, this is this next slide, direct triggers versus leaky gut triggers. So again, everybody, according to, I think it was 2015, a research study was released, which, said that gluten can cause a leaky gut in everyone. So it doesn't, even if someone's not sensitive to gluten, it could cause a leaky gut, which is part of that triad of autoimmunity. But yeah, so the point of this slide is that it's common to have more than one trigger. So someone might, let's say if gluten is a trigger, like I said, it's not a trigger in everybody, but it can potentially cause a leaky gut in everybody. But let's say if it is a trigger in someone and they avoid gluten, they go gluten-free 100%, maybe they even go autoimmune paleo diet. And I'll talk a little bit more about that during the challenge. I'm gonna, spend most of the challenge is not going to focus on diet, but Monday I will talk a little bit more about diet than the rest of the challenge, because I mean it is important when it comes to thyroid healing, immune system healing. But yeah, so anyway, I've just lost my train of thought. But so with gluten, what yeah, I hate when that happens. So all right, hopefully it'll come to me. If not, someone could remind me what my train of thought was. But anyway, so with gluten sensitivity, what I was saying is if you're going on a strict gluten-free diet or autoimmune paleo diet, and let's say you don't feel any better, it could be that, or maybe you feel better, like maybe 30% better, but still not quite where you need to be. It could be that gluten was one trigger, but again, there could be other things. There could be other underlying issues, other triggers. So how can you find your triggers? So symptoms, maybe. I mean, the problem is that there's a lot of overlap. So for example, if someone's feeling fatigue, it could be due to problems with adrenals. It could be due to Epstein-Barr. It could be due to Lyme disease. It could be due to nutrient deficiencies. I mean, there's a lot of things that can cause certain symptoms, such as fatigue. So it usually is challenging to find triggers just by symptoms alone. Comprehensive health history is like if you see a practitioner like myself or another functional medicine practitioner, even maybe a conventional medical doctor, but a lot of times, like if you go into an endocrinologist, of course, they're not looking for triggers. They might do a comprehensive health history, but for other things, and you could conduct your own health history as well. Testing, of course, is a way to find triggers. And in my book, Hashimoto's Triggers, I talk about conservative versus comprehensive testing. So everyone's different. It's hard to predict what tests someone specifically needs. Of course, the comprehensive health history will help with that to some extent, but I tend to be more on the conservative side, but again, it does depend on the comprehensive health history. But like when I was dealing with Graves' disease in 2008 is when I was diagnosed with Graves, and I had basic tests done. Depends on what you think basic test is. Some people think just thyroid blood test or basic test. So I did have blood testing, but I had an adrenal saliva test, and I do hair mineral analysis testing. I don't rely on it for all the minerals, but I've been doing that for 11 years, since 2009. So that's just another test I use. But that's all at the time. That's all I had. Now, after I've been in remission since 2009, and I've had stool panels, organic acids testing since then, just because I learn about these. I go to workshops, I go seminars. But at the time when I was dealing with Graves, I just got some, again, more conservative testing. I don't know if basic, or again, some would consider that even not to be conservative. But again, so there are some practitioners who recommend comprehensive stool panel to everybody, organic acids test to everybody, for example. It's not a wrong approach. It's just their approach. There's pros and cons to each. There's, if you do comprehensive testing on everybody, the good thing is you might more likely to find answers, but you're also more likely to, there's going to be people that spend hundreds of dollars that they don't need to spend. And then conservative testing, the person will save money but again, maybe they might miss some things too. So, you could always do more testing later. And when, even though I'm more on the conservative side, if I think someone needs a comprehensive stool panel, organic acids test, I will let them know. And again, sometimes I don't know, sometimes I don't recommend it, and we need to do it later on. Sometimes I think someone needs it, we test for it, and it's negative. And, so that's the pros and cons of doing testing in general. And are blood tests enough to find your triggers? Usually not. Usually you need to do more than just blood tests. I mean, certain viruses like Epstein-Barr, Lyme disease, even though with Lyme, false negatives are common, but, so there are exceptions, but usually just doing, and most people, when they get blood tests, they're not even getting those types of tests. They're getting a thyroid panel, maybe antibodies, thyroid antibodies, probably like a CBC, complete blood count with differential, comprehensive metabolic panel, iron, maybe iron panel, vitamin D. So, you know, and a lot of people don't even get, you know, the last few that I mentioned, but anyway, so that is it. I mentioned it was going to be a brief presentation. And so a reminder for those who have not joined the Accelerated Thyroid Healing Challenge, definitely feel free to do so at rapidthyroidhealing.com. The first lesson will be released Monday morning I plan on just sending out an automated email that will be released at 6 a.m. Eastern time, and along with the first assignments. And, you know, for those who are in the group, there'll be, yeah, anyway, I think I'm gonna put together I already put together a separate video for the Facebook group, but I think I'm gonna do another one tomorrow. And all right, well, if you have questions, which I know there are already questions, I'm going to go back and forth. You know, I've done this before. I did this for when I had my challenge in April. I didn't have a Facebook group, and June I had a Facebook group, and then I would Zoom all the calls I would live stream the Zoom calls to Facebook. So I got a lot of practice during my 21-day challenge in June, and yeah, so and I've done a few since then as well, but and more recently I just did a few on Facebook Live, but then I figured let's do Zoom today along with Facebook, just because not everybody's on Facebook. And all right, so let me just take a quick sip of water, and I will then start looking at questions. And also, one other thing, I'm going to try my best to diversify. Those who attend a number of these are familiar. So, you know, it's common for people to have more than one question, but a lot, depending on how many questions, usually what I do is I try to get to everybody at least once. I can't guarantee that. And again, there's the challenge with Accelerated Thyroid Healing Challenge. You know, there'll be plenty of there'll be the 2 90-minute Q&A sessions, and there'll be random Facebook Lives. And then also in the Facebook group too. But I will still try to attempt to answer as many questions as I can. But if someone, you know, asks 3 or 4 questions, you know, I'll probably hit 1 or 2 at the most. And then if I have time later on, I could go back. But again, just want to make sure to try to get to everybody at least once. So I'm going to start with Zoom. And maybe what I'll do is I'll go like 15 minutes back and forth between Zoom and the Facebook group. Let me just check on that Facebook group. So I don't know if this is up to date. Sometimes my computer kind of yeah, I think it is this. So I think we have 16 people in the Facebook group, about 80 or so last I checked, yeah, and Zoom. So like I said, I was expecting the opposite, but it is Saturday morning, and it is short notice. So all right, let's go back to the chat. Oh, let me take my quick sip of water. All right, so let's. Okay, so there's no name behind here, but what is the gold standard of thyroid medication? Is it still considered WP, or has this changed since reformulation? So, I mean, the gold standard from a conventional medical standpoint is Synthroid, is levothyroxine. So Synthroid, you know, when it comes to hypothyroidism. So, you know, there's people with both hyper and hypo, Graves and Hashimoto's. So this is for those with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. So, you know, as far as desiccated thyroid hormone, which I agree, if I had to take thyroid hormone, I think I would take desiccated thyroid. So from a natural standpoint, I would, yeah, agree that desiccated would be the gold standard. But I do have a lot of patients still taking levothyroxine, and for different reasons. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. WP thyroid and Nature Thyroid. I mean, it used to be Armor, and then WP thyroid, Nature Thyroid, the same manufacturers, but Then Armor, of course, underwent reformulation, and then more recently, WP Thyroid and Nature-Throid. So yeah, that's, I mentioned, like I just mentioned, if I had Hashimoto's, let's say, and if I had to take thyroid hormone replacement, again, I would lean towards the desiccated. In the past, I probably would take WP Thyroid or Nature-Throid. But since then, I've spoken with people who have taken more so the Nature-Throid, where they just, some people are fine. Some people, if there's anybody in the Facebook group or on Zoom with this experience, of course, feel free to share. But there's some people who just haven't felt the same since the reformulation. So I haven't heard as much with WP Thyroid, even though they're from the same company. So that probably still would be my choice. But again, if anybody has feedback on that, that's the great thing about these, the Zoom, you could see each other comments, and same thing with Facebook. So Lori, I have an excess of iodine. Can I have sea salt? So sea salt does not have, like a natural sea salt, like Celtic sea salts or pink Himalayan, that does not have iodine. So I don't hesitate to recommend sea salt to, again, my patients with Graves and Hashimoto's, even those who are cautious with iodine. All right, does supplementing with iron help with the conversion of thyroid hormone? If you're iron deficient, it could be a factor. It's usually not the main factor. So T4 converts into T3, for those who are not familiar with what this question is about. So most of the conversion takes place in the liver. So if someone has problems converting T4 to T3, liver is a big area to look at. A lot of it also takes place in the gut, I think 20%. Adrenals, if someone has adrenal imbalances, especially high cortisol, that can cause problems converting T4 to T3. Selenium deficiency, usually you need to be real deficient. So that even more than iron, at least from the research I've done. But low iron could cause a lot of problems. I mean, a lot of people, when they think about low iron, they're just thinking about iron deficiency, like they're just thinking fatigue, or, some people think, well, anemia, but even that they don't think much of. But iron, again, I mean, it's important for thyroid health, but it forms, like it's important with thyroid peroxidase, which is an enzyme that is important for the production of thyroid hormone. And many of you are familiar with thyroid peroxidase or TPO antibodies. And then also iron is important for to have healthy cytochrome P450 enzymes, CYP450 enzymes, which are important for liver detoxification. So if someone's, I mean, any nutrient deficiency is a big deal, but a lot of people don't. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people that do pay attention to them, but there are a lot of people that, just, oh, it's a nutrient deficiency, not a big deal. But, they run, you need healthy nutrients to run all the different enzymatic pathways in your body. And then, all right, so Lori, I take Armour Thyroid. I was on Levoxyl for years, but stopped working. Okay, well, thanks, Lori, for sharing. I'm glad that the Armour is working. I assume it's working. Hopefully it's working. All right, and then Maxine, trouble finding this webinar today, technical problem. Yeah, hopefully what I did, with the group, I assume some people with, maybe that's why the numbers are low with the group. And someone gave me this warning too. She might even be in the group. So I posted it as an event, but the link I included was not for the event. It was in the Facebook group, because Anyway, so I'm still also not, can't say I'm an expert with Facebook, but that I've had that problem too in the past, where I've been a part of a group or something, and someone's posting a video or running a webinar, and then all of a sudden, they can't find it in the group. So if you just go to the main page, that's again, so hopefully others in the group are helping others who might not be able to find it. But All right, so I'm glad you found it, Maxine, and thanks for joining. She also was a member of the 21-day challenge in June. So Sonia, what is the best test for testing food sensitivity? I'm in the UK. So so I'm not huge into food sensitivity testing, even though I brought it up. The tests are not perfect. So, but when I do testing, I do like Cyrix Labs, which I think they now are available in the UK. Cyrix Labs has their Array 10. They have a 90 and 180 panel. You would just need to see which foods you're eating. Like if you're eating a lot of foods in the 180 panel, get that. If you're eating mostly foods in the 90 panel, then get that. Genova Diagnostics, I know they're based out of United States, but they also have, um, I guess they have a branch in the United Kingdom, and they have a food sensitivity panel. I can't say I'm super familiar with it. I like Genova, but not usually. I use them for other things, not their food sensitivity testing. So Linda has a question: what makes thyroid nodules grow? Are there food triggers or natural ways of shrinking thyroid nodules? So I've written a few articles on this. So estrogen metabolism is, problems with estrogen metabolism, estrogen dominance. And if you visit my website, naturalendocrinesolutions.com, you could, and if you just type in thyroid nodules, you'll find some articles. So estrogen dominance, insulin resistance, and actually, a few months ago, I wrote an article on toxic multinodule goiter. And even if for those just who have regular nodules, it's still, a lot of the information is still relevant. But there are other articles on my website. There's like one, I think, 5 things to know about thyroid nodules. That's not too old, maybe like 2 years old, and one on insulin resistance. All right, so all right. So question, again, I'm going to try to get to different, and some people it might be an accident. I get this all the time with Zoom calls that someone reacted privately, like message me privately. But so I just won't mention sometimes I slip and mention the person's first name, which is probably not a real big deal. But so this person ask, how will you know you have a thyroid situation? What are the symptoms? What does it look like or feel like when there's a situation? So yeah, this is a very broad question, but so one way is testing. The thing is with testing, like doing a thyroid panel, TSH, TSH, free T3, free T4. Problem with the thyroid is, especially if you go to a conventional medical doctor, like your family medical doctor, is they oftentimes will just rely on the lab ranges. So if like someone has a TSH of, let's say, 3.5, that's on the higher side. It's outside of the optimal range, but it's within the lab range. So many medical doctors will say, oh, it looks fine. And same thing with the thyroid hormone levels. They might be, in the case of, again, hypothyroidism, they might be less than optimal, but still within the range. And many don't look at antibodies until the thyroid is out of range. So if you can, I would say to test free T3, free T4, TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, and antibodies as well. So thyroid peroxidase or TPO antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies. The antibodies associated with Graves' disease are thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins or TSH receptor antibodies. And then symptoms, it depends. I mean, if someone has hypothyroidism, a lot of times they'll get fatigue, maybe brain fog, weight gain, coldness in the hands and feet, sometimes constipation. And with Graves' disease or hyperthyroidism, increased resting heart rate, palpitations, tremors, sometimes weight loss. Again, not everybody. Some people experience weight gain with hyperthyroidism. But I lost 42 pounds when I was dealing with hyperthyroidism, increased appetite, sometimes loose stools. All right, so again, I guess I'm gonna spread the wealth and try to get to everybody at least once. So those who ask multiple questions, I might get back to you. If not, I mean, hopefully everybody who's, everybody who's in the group, or most people, should be part of the challenge. And hopefully those on Zoom, most people are part of the challenge I'll be having Monday. And again, for those who are not familiar with, those who don't know what I'm talking about, just look at the slide that's up. So Nora, do you do genetic testing for mold, food sensitivities, pesticides, mold, infections, or how do you find out the real triggers? Sometimes we do. Again, I don't do that in every single person, because genetic testing, that's not really finding triggers. I mean, there's polymorphisms that which are common genetic variations that people have, and like MTHFR or COMT. So it's not a bad idea to do that, but that's not really looking at triggers. And again, not with mold, not everybody, but a lot of times there are certain symptoms associated with toxic mold. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, for everybody, of course, but attend the challenge, the Accelerated Thyroid Healing Challenge. I'll get into more detail, with some of these. But like I said, not everybody needs to do all the testing. So, and a lot of people, even if they need it, they can't afford it. So, and also one thing I should say, I always give options. So even if I'm recommending conservative testing, I'm going to give options. Usually, it depends on the person. If someone flat out tells me that, this is all they can afford, I'm still going to tell them what they need. So even if they say, I can't afford to do this, but I think they need a test, I will let them know. But, I'm not going to give like optional tests that I think are not necessary. Whereas if someone is starting up a new patient, I'll tell them what I think they need. And then I'll give them optional tests, because, for example, maybe I don't think they need a comprehensive stool panel, but maybe they want a comprehensive stool panel because they, learned about it. And again, you can't always go by symptoms too. So there's always a chance someone might need that test later on. So I always give people options, and there are some people that choose to do more comprehensive testing. Because ultimately it's up to the person to decide what testing, but yeah, so it really depends on the person. Just, not everybody needs every single test out there. You could do that. Of course, you could test for every single potential, or, I mean, you really can't test for every trigger out there, but you could, spend a few $1,000s, and then, but again, not everybody is able to do that. So I usually start out somewhat conservatively, give people options. So if they want to do more comprehensive testing, and then if someone chooses just to do conservative testing, as long as everything's moving in the right direction, their symptoms are improving, the testing is like the blood test, thyroid panel, thyroid antibodies, for example, improving, then there's no need to add other tests. On the other hand, if someone isn't progressing as expected, that's when, we probably would look into other testing. Maybe, again, definitely attend the challenge, especially, I would attend all 5, but especially on Tuesday will be, every day is going to be beneficial, but some of this, as far as Tuesday, will apply. All right, so Celestine, how do infections in other parts of the body affect the thyroid? So they won't necessarily affect the thyroid, even though, and also I should mention, I kind of like hinted when I said that most, the majority of people with hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism have thyroid autoimmunity. So it's an accelerated thyroid healing challenge, but it's, we're going to be focusing a lot on immune healing. Just it's, I think it has a better ring, accelerated thyroid healing, than accelerated thyroid, / immune system healing. And like I said, I didn't want to just to focus on like thyroid autoimmunity. So, and I figure those with Graves and Hashimoto's still would kind of understand, especially those who know me. I always say about how the immune system, like Graves and Hashimoto's are more immune system conditions than thyroid conditions. And even something like toxic multinodular goiter, it's, affecting the thyroid, but there's other underlying imbalances. But infections in other parts of the body can, cause inflammation, can affect the immune. They don't always affect the thyroid. Not every infection, of course, is going to affect the thyroid. But even if it's not, especially if someone has a gut infection, you need a healthy gut to have a healthy immune system. So that's an obvious case of where infections in another part of the body can cause the development of thyroid autoimmunity. All right, so Hannah, I'm going to answer yours, then I'm going to jump to the Facebook questions, spend a little bit of time there, go back to Zoom. So again, I'm going to go back and forth. So Hannah, does the type of thyroid antibody indicate if a person has Graves or Hashimoto's? So yes. So, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's not just the antibodies, it's the presentation. So, if someone has hyperthyroidism, so elevated thyroid hormone levels, depressed TSH, and so they have, so if they have elevated thyroid hormone levels, depressed TSH, and they have elevated thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, then that is typically diagnostic of Graves' disease. On the other hand, if someone has elevated TSH and lower, or less than optimal thyroid hormone levels in the presence of thyroid peroxidase and or thyroid globulin antibodies, that usually is diagnostic of Hashimoto's. But some people have overlap. Like a lot of people with Graves' disease also have, not only have thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, but they also have thyroid peroxidase antibodies. And so you could argue maybe they have, TPO is more commonly associated with Hashimoto's, but it's also very common in Graves. Now, thyroid globulin is definitely more associated with Hashimoto's. So point is, some people do have the antibodies for both Graves' disease and Hashimoto's. It's actually not uncommon. So, but yeah, just like if someone had, there's other auto antibodies as well, antibodies associated with rheumatoid arthritis. So if they have that antibody, then that's associated with that condition. And, Graves and Hashimoto's, even though they both affect thyroid, they're both different conditions. They're both autoimmune thyroid conditions, but they're not exactly the same. So let's move on to the Facebook group. And then again, we will definitely go back to Zoom. And yeah, it just makes me wonder what the Facebook group, just because there's so many more people in Zoom, if just people are not finding it in the Facebook group, which I need to fix when it comes to the challenge, to make sure those in the Facebook group are able to get the video, not the videos are through email, but like when I do like random, these random calls. All right, so we have a few more people introducing themselves. So Wendy from Eugene, Oregon, and Kat from California, Renee from Kentucky. Okay, and stay in your lane. Again, she was from the 21-day challenge, and she's asking, how was my vacation? So yeah, I did go on a little bit of a road trip, which was which was nice. And then she put start here first. So sorry. Yeah, I didn't see that, but yeah, I didn't see that until I started already. But yeah, to me, it makes sense to start in Zoom because there's so many people. There's more people right now. There's like a little over 70 people in Zoom, only 23 in the Facebook group. And then also the last few calls, like I did Q&As, were just in Facebook. So I figured I'd start with Zoom today. And then, so Natalie, out of the 3 elements in the triad, is one more common in causing autoimmunity than another? I mean, all 3 are common, but I mean, the trigger, like a lot of people have the genetics for different types of autoimmune conditions, but not everybody, so you do need to have the genetics, but the trigger is more important. Now, is the trigger more important than the leaky gut? I don't know. I mean, again, everybody, according to that, it's still a theory. A lot of prominent healthcare practitioners talk about triad of autoimmunity, but we know environment is more important than genetics in this case. But is the exposure to trigger more important or more? I mean, again, you need all 3. So when you say more common, you have to have all 3. But which one is like more of a factor? like I said, the trigger, leaky gut are more a factor, but which one of those? Like I said, you do need all three, but all right, like I said, same here with this. I'm gonna get to everybody at least once. Just I know there's not as many questions, but I want to be fair, and there's a lot more people on Zoom. So if I get to everybody once on Facebook, even if it only takes like 5-10 minutes, I'm gonna go back to Zoom. And again, I might go back, like I will go back to Facebook, but I'm trying to get to I like to get to everybody at least one time, and then I'll consider repeat questions. I'm not sure if your name is, I apologize if it's Annie or Annie, pronounced, spelled a little bit different, which I like the uniqueness of names when they're spelled differently, but sometimes the pronunciation is challenging. But but anyway, I just had a yearly thyroid blood test, and I'm taking thyroid medication for Hashimoto's. What will cause my TSH to go below the normal reference range, but my TPO antibodies to double from 650 to 1290? So taking the thyroid medication affects the hormones and the TSH. So if you're taking a higher amount of thyroid hormone medication, that would cause TSH to get lower, to get, some cases depressed. If someone takes too much thyroid hormone and they're hyper, or maybe not completely hyper, but thyroid hormone levels are on the higher side, that will definitely cause TSH to decrease. But again, remember, Hashimoto's is an immune system condition, so the thyroid hormone replacement is not doing anything for the immune system. So that's really what we're talking about here. Just there's something triggering that, something, some factor that's affecting that. But yeah, that's, those are two different things. The thyroid hormone medication is just focusing on the thyroid hormone levels, and the TSH, not the antibodies. All right, so Laurie here says, a lot of doctors won't let me take natural thyroid if needed for myself. I got sick on the lowest dose when I tried at a stage of only having high levels of testing, but not over normal limits for thyroid testing because I had the weight effects in others. So I'm not sure. You said you got sick on the lowest dose. So does that mean of the natural thyroid? I got sick at the lowest dose when I tried at a stage of only having high levels of testing. Like high levels of TSH, you mean, but not over? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but if you might want to comment again, just re-clarify. But yeah, a lot of medical doctors, I will say that many medical doctors won't recommend desiccated thyroid. And I'll also say not everybody does better on desiccated thyroid. There are some people that, for whatever reason, seem to do better on synthetic thyroid hormones. So, you want to listen to your body. There are hypoallergenic forms of thyroid hormone, of synthetic thyroid hormone replacement, such as Tirosint. Again, there are some people that have told me they do better on Synthroid than Tirosint. But I know if I had to take synthetic thyroid hormone, I would at least look into something more hypoallergenic, such as Tirosint. But if I didn't do well on that, I'm sure I would stop taking it. All right, so again, not sure if your name's pronounced Heidi, just but spelled differently. So, but anyway, thank you for your question. And so she's been on methimazole for 4 years due to Graves' disease with anemia, but recently the TSH is normal, has normalized, but T3 and T4 is way higher. Now, any recommendations, and how can I contact you directly? So for the last part, if you want to contact me directly, not just like do the Q&As or the challenge, you could contact our office, send an email to either staff@naturalendocrinesolutions.com or info@naturalendocrinesolutions.com, and you could inquire about working with me one-on-one. So, but yeah, so you're on the methimazole and anemia, which again, methimazole commonly increases liver enzymes, can lower white blood cell count, usually doesn't cause anemia, so that could be something else. But so your TSH is normal, but T3 and T4 is way higher. So yeah, I'd be curious to see, like when you say TSH is normal, is it above 1? because yeah, so you know, sometimes again it's within a normal range, but still low. But that's not as common. I will say that when T3 and T4, you know, TSH typically responds to T3 and T4. So if T3 and T4 are high, commonly we see TSH undetectable. And many times, even when T3, T4, like if someone has hyperthyroidism graves, I know some of you know what I'm about to say, or you might not know what I'm about to say, but when I say it, you're going to understand, you're going to relate to it. So there are a lot of people with hyperthyroidism that so they have elevated free T3, free T4, depressed TSH, and then, you know, let's say to take anti-thyroid medication such as methimazole, and the thyroid hormone levels are within range, but the TSH is still less than detectable. It's still depressed. It doesn't budge. And that actually is a very common scenario. So your scenario, not as common, where it sounds like maybe methimazole helped to lower the or I'm sorry, that it didn't really affect T3 and T4. She said your T3 and T4 is way higher, but TSH is normal. So that's not common. I mean, TSH is a pituitary hormone, so it's not a thyroid hormone. So something like that, I would think maybe something is going on with the pituitary. But yeah, so it'd be interesting to look at like before and after, because again, that's not a common situation where, you know, T3, T4 gets higher, yet TSH increases. So, but let's see, like I said, trying to get to everybody here. So Linda, my local lab offers a heavy metal test I can purchase on my own. However, I'm not sure what I could do with the results. Do you recommend this test? I mean, I do, so there's a few different ways to measure heavy metals. So there's blood testing, which is more acute, and then there's hair testing and urine testing. So I mentioned earlier how I like hair testing, but some doctors do provoked urine testing. Typically with that, you would do collect two urine samples, you get a baseline sample, take a provocation agent, like a chelating agent, and then do a post urine sample. So I don't know which one you're talking about. So that's why I'm giving like different options. So those probably are the two options, either the hair test or urine test. I mean, they both could be valuable. They're different. You definitely, when you take the provocation, the chelating agent, you're more likely to have positive findings. But you know, there's potential risks with the especially chelation therapy, maybe even with the chelating agent. But you know, it's just different, I guess you could say, because different practitioners have different ways of testing. And you know, like if there's other practitioners, you know, we could go back and forth and say, hey, you know, this way is the best, this way, you know. And but again, so I've been using hair testing and that's not a perfect test either, but neither is a urine testing. So but yeah, I think there is some value knowing what you know, what heavy metals someone has. You know, just keep in mind what chemicals though, you know, which, you know, heavy metals are a type of environmental toxin, and you can't test for all, not just heavy metals, but you can't test, well, maybe you could test for most heavy metals depending on what test you use. But either way, there's a lot of toxins, a lot of chemicals. You can't test for all of them. So definitely would focus overall on reducing toxic load. Again, we'll talk some about that during the challenge as well. And Lori is from Portland, Oregon. And Andrea from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And then Andrea has a question: what can you do for Hashimoto's disease? So remember, Hashimoto's is an immune system condition. If you want a lot, you know, if you want a good amount, like definitely anyone with Hashimoto's or Graves attend the, you know, accelerated thyroid healing challenge, and then you'll kind of get a good idea of what can be done. So again, rapidthyroidhealing.com. So if you haven't registered, please go ahead and do that, which again, you're in a Facebook group. So my guess is most people are probably registered for the challenge, but if not, definitely do so. It's free. And she's been diagnosed for 2 years ago. And so You know what I'm going to do also? I need to start just liking these, so when I go back, at least I can't do that on Zoom, but on Facebook, I'll know whose questions I answered if I am able to go back. But yeah, so it's an immune system condition. So want to find triggers, remove triggers, correct underlying imbalances. So there's a lot that we could do for Hashimoto's. And, you know, again, you might want to check out my book as well, Hashimoto's Triggers. And, you know, so, but again, definitely it's a broad question. So it's a good question, but I would, you know, even if you don't want to get my book, which, like I said, it's pretty inexpensive on the Kindle version, $6, but visit my website. You know, it's free. Everything's free. Well, you know, I have hundreds of articles and blog posts. And then again, the upcoming challenge is free. There's, you know, no charge, no obligation. All right, I'm going to answer a few more. And okay, Maxine is in the Facebook group. So thanks, Maxine, for being both in Zoom. Yeah, if you see anybody who's looking for for the video still, at this time they might have possibly given up, but again, let's see. So, all right, and this is going to be recorded. Someone did ask will be recorded because they missed some of it. So I mean, it'll be for those in the Facebook group. It'll be available right away. But also with Zoom call, I will record it. Like it is being recorded, so I will send an email probably get that tomorrow. Okay, and as far as how you can get my book, Amazon, yeah, Amazon is the best way to get my book. So I'm going to switch over to, because again, there's a lot of questions from the same people on Facebook. And I'm sure there are a lot of unanswered questions on Zoom. And as I said, I always try to answer everybody at least one time. I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. All right, so LC here asks, how often do you think you should get biopsies? So, so hopefully never, but if someone has thyroid nodules, then, you know, it depends on the person. It's the same thing. Even if they have nodules, you don't necessarily need to get a thyroid biopsy. There's an article I wrote. If you visit my website and naturalendocrinesolutions.com, there's a little search bar, type in biopsies, and there's 3 characteristics you look for in order to determine if someone needs a biopsy. And that's the size of the nodule, which in the research I've done says 2 centimeters or greater, but some doctors, if it's 1 centimeter or greater, which is a larger nodule, even 1 centimeter or more, and then micro calcifications, as well as microcalcifications, and then a solid nodule. So if you have two out of 3 of those characteristics, that might be an indication to get a biopsy. If not, then you probably, again, I can't tell anybody not to get a biopsy. That's up to the person, but just read that article, because again, it is research based. And you know, if someone gets 1 biopsy, then yeah. So sorry, I get alerts from Facebook. Also, I'm on here, and Sue. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sue had to go to Zoom because couldn't find it on Facebook. Yeah, I'll have to figure that out. Like, someone did send me an email, like pointing to the events and all that, because I did post I posted it in the events, but then there was a place to put the link in, which is under the regular Facebook group, and that's where I put the link. But some people might still be looking under the events, so so I will try my best to make this clear before the actual, you know, this is like a pre-challenge video. Think about it this way, just a Q&A, but come Monday, hopefully everything will be clear. But anyway, so if you get LC, if you get a biopsy, And, like, let's say if you have 2 out of 3 of those characteristics, so you do get a biopsy. I mean, and if it's negative, then I don't, I've had people ask that question where, like, do I need to get multiple biopsies? And it depends on the person. You would need an ultrasound before getting a biopsy. So yeah, so I would say it depends on what the follow-up ultrasound looks. If the follow-up ultrasound is showing that, the thyroid nodule, for example, is getting bigger, let's say if it was like 2 centimeters and, then it was 2.5 centimeters 6 months later, and again, it was also solid, then maybe. I mean, it's a tough decision, but, if they did a biopsy the first time and if it was negative, I mean, could it be positive, the 6 months later? I mean, it's possible, but again, we'll try to, of course, minimize that. So, all right. So Sue, tips for converting T4 to T3. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, like liver, focus on liver health, gut health, adrenal health, sometimes nutrient deficiencies. Someone mentioned iron, which maybe could be a factor, but especially selenium. But liver, gut, adrenals, especially liver and gut. And I've written also a few articles on conversion in my, you can find my website. All right, so Anne, I got Graves' disease and have mild eye protrusion. Will my eyes go back to normal? So most of the time when it's mild, it will. For moderate to severe Graves' disease, it, I mean, it depends. Now there's something called TEPEZA, which were even for some people with mild eye problems, mild thyroid eye disease, like that seems to work really good with the bulging, the protrusion. Um, it's, if someone doesn't have health insurance, it's outrageous from what I understand. But yeah, so what was I going to say? So yeah, it's a PISA, the 8 infusions, 3 weeks apart, and yeah, so it's new. It just came out this year. Obviously, I would try to do everything you can without the Tapiza, just because it is medication, and even if someone can't afford it, you want to try to do things without taking the medication. And so Terry, I'm going to try Tirosint. Are you familiar with this? And thanks for doing this. So you are very welcome. And yeah, you might have asked this before I mentioned Tirosint. So I mentioned earlier that Tirosint, yeah, I actually wrote an article on Tirosint a few years ago as well. So you could search my website and definitely find that. Okay, so I have found this extreme heat is awful on my joints and stomach. Anyone else? Any solutions? Um, Yeah, so kind of odd with the stomach, like the extreme heat. And yeah, I'd be curious if you have what hyperthyroidism. A lot of people with hyperthyroidism have heat intolerant, like because they already have the increased metabolism, and just getting the thyroid under control could help greatly. But when you say like awful on the joints and the stomach, I'm not sure. Do you mean like joint pain? Stomach. I mean, it sounds like you might have something underlying if that's the case. If the heat is causing problems with the joints and stomach, then again, I mean, immune system's important, but possibly an underlying infection. Cindy, NP thyroid changed my life with Hashimoto's. I have a lot less depression and more energy. All right. Well, thank you for sharing, Cindy, and that's great news. All right, so long question from Kelly. So I have had 8 pregnancies in the past 15 years, 7 babies, 1 miscarriage. My thyroid antibodies get better during pregnancy, then go up afterwards and don't settle down much until 12 to 18 months after birth. I'm wondering if my thyroid issues are mostly pregnancy related. I've never had any major Hashimoto symptoms, just some mild eczema. Do you think I've been improperly diagnosed with Hashimoto's because my antibodies are mostly pregnancy related? And 2, I have no symptoms. I really take good care of myself, eat well, good weight, exercise every day and weight lift. I don't overdo exercise. I mean, you have, so it's what's called postpartum thyroiditis. And I do have an article on that as well, and talk about that in my book, Hashimoto's Triggers. So, I mean, yeah, as far as properly diagnosed, I mean, if you, so if you didn't, Hashimoto, as I mentioned earlier, if someone has elevated TSH in the presence of those thyroid antibodies, then they will typically be diagnosed with Hashimoto's. But just the antibodies themselves doesn't mean that someone has, I mean, they have the antibodies to Hashimoto. So if you had elevated TSH and those antibodies, then it wasn't a misdiagnosis. If your TSH and free T3, free T4 look fine, and antibodies were elevated, again, I don't want to say that you were misdiagnosed, but that's typically not when they diagnose Hashimoto's, but you would still have the antibodies. And so it's great that you're not feeling symptoms, that you're taking real good care of yourself. I mean, you're doing a lot of things. I mean, I will say, it's still, I brought that up in the book, Hashimoto's Triggers, just because, again, if you have elevated autoantibodies, I know pregnancy is, seems to be the trigger, but there's still, in order to have that autoimmune component, you have to have that increase in intestinal permeability, the leaky gut as well. So according to that Triad of Autoimmunity, even though you're feeling pretty good, taking good care of yourself, you might possibly have that increase in intestinal permeability. So maybe if you focus on that, that maybe you won't, well, you might be done having babies, but, and someone, thank you, someone drew on Zoom, but then deleted that. So I appreciate those that, if it's an accident and you delete it, thank you so much. But yeah, you might be done having children since you have 7 already. But if for any reason you're not, or even if you, either way, you want maybe focus on gut healing. Never hurts to focus on gut healing. Okay, Cynthia, I'm not sure of your question. You said, I am not sure I have it. My IZB works. She's a slight problem. I'm on 15 and 30 of armor. Yeah, maybe you could restate the question. I'm not sure if you're asking maybe about if you have a condition like Hashimoto's. Again, I'm not 100% sure. All right, so Patel asks, can thyroid nodules be melted away at initial phase through diet and medication? So typically, so I mentioned earlier that many, if not most, thyroid nodules are caused by problems with estrogen metabolism or insulin resistance. So, I mean, diet can definitely play a role, but usually you need to do more than just eating well. And yeah, the medication usually itself is not going to resolve thyroid nodules. But yeah, definitely, again, on my website, and maybe I'll do like during the challenge. It depends. I have a lot already planned, so no promises, but maybe I'll do like a random Facebook Live, just like giving like kind of like I did today, like a brief presentation on nodules. But if I do that, a lot of it's going to be taken from my article I already written, just just kind of repurpose and convert some of that into slides. And so I would just say to watch the because again, I've done a done a like, it's not like all the research I've done is like years. I'm always writing updated articles, and wrote one on multinodule goiter, toxic multinodule goiter, just a few months ago. So it was pretty recent. All right, let's see. So Star said, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism years ago, have goiter with 3 solid nodules. So again, a good example of multinodule goiter, but the labs always come back in normal range. Is there anything I can take that would help with the hypo symptoms? My PCP says not now because it could cause other health issues. Your thoughts? Also have T2 and take meds for that. Not sure what type 2 diabetes, or so maybe you're saying that, I'm not sure, but yeah, so you said you're diagnosed with hypothyroidism and you're feeling hypo, but your PCP said not to take anything because it could cause other health issues. That's kind of odd. I would probably say switch doctors. I mean, I would still try to get to the cause. So we mentioned like, nodules, and again, read even though it's toxic multinodule goiter, that I wrote the blog post about a few months ago. It's still, even if you have, and I do have an article on regular multinodular goiter that's a few years old, but again, still estrogen metabolism problems, insulin resistance. So, I mean, definitely read the information, but there is a time and place for thyroid hormone replacement. And if you were diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and if you're feeling hypo and you're not taking anything, I definitely would, I would recommend to take it. So, yeah. So again, I would recommend to at least talk to your doctor, I should say, not take, obviously you need a doctor's prescription to take it. But yeah, like I said, not everybody. Obviously, we want to try to address underlying causes, find triggers, remove triggers, correct underlying imbalances. But some people do need to take thyroid hormone replacement. Same thing with Graves, hyperthyroidism. Some people need to take, people need to take, antithyroid medication. All right, so Maxine, I'm seeing extreme shedding now as I'm back on the methimazole since the end of May. I'm ready to start a supplement to help with hair. I just started garlic over the last week. Which of these three would be the best? Borajol, evening primrose, or biotin? Oh boy, it really depends. I mean, honestly, if someone's shedding their hair because of the thyroid, the methimazole obviously affects the thyroid. So if someone's hyper, they could get hair loss. If someone is hypo, they could have hair loss, so so if that's the case, then I don't know if any of these will work, but nutrient deficiencies can be a cause too. So they're different. Like Borajol and evening primrose both have gamma linolenic acid, so those are both similar, not exactly the same. Biotin, on the other hand, that's vitamins, so that's completely different. So I would, if I had to choose, I would say Borajol or evening primrose, one of those two. But like I said, if the hair shedding is due to being back on the methimazole, then taking these other supplements probably aren't going to help much. Okay, so all right, so I had Graves in remission, but I've been under so much stress that I feel it is back. What can I do? Yeah, so again, a lot of people relapse because when they just take the medication, they take the antithyroid medication, but don't do anything to address the cause of the problem. So again, definitely, of course, attend the Accelerated Thyroid Healing Challenge. Again, rapidthyroidhealing.com, as it mentions on the slide. But yeah, so again, it's about finding and removing triggers, correcting underlying imbalances. You want to be safe while doing that. So if you feel hyper again, you might need to either take antithyroid medication or something like bugleweed, which is what I took when I dealt with Graves' disease. Okay, and there's some things I will say that I can't, yeah, like someone asked, can you speak about the psychology and energetic medicine and the fifth chakra? I know I can heal this in reverse. So again, that's probably, someone else would be better. I can't say I'm an expert when it comes to, energetic medicine. All right, so Nina, I don't think I answered a question from you. I'll go a little bit longer, at least until 2:30, maybe a few minutes longer. Let me just check Facebook. I think we have any new questions. I think really it's just saying, so again, I'm going to just try to stay in your lane. She commented, but you didn't have a question. So back, battery died. Sorry about that. How to switch from meds to bugleweed. Yeah, good question. So if someone's on the medication and they want to switch to bugleweed, I will typically have them take both at the same time. Like, you know, like I can't tell someone to stop the medication, but what happens if someone's on antithyroid medication and bugleweed at the same time and they become more hypo on the hypo side, then the prescribing doctor will reduce the dosage of the antithyroid medication. And, you know, and then eventually the ideally person will just be taking bugleweed, and then eventually the ideally person will be off of both, you know, because, you know, I took bugleweed in 2008 into 2009, but I haven't taken it since 2009. So, you know, so say, you know, with both bugleweed and, yeah, bugleweed and antithyroid medication, you want to make sure you, you know, you want to be off of both of those long term. All right, so back to Nina here. Sorry, I was just, I'm trying to be fair with the Facebook group, but there's still a lot more people. There's 64 people still on Zoom, only 12 now in the Facebook group, and there are new questions, but they're repeat questions, like they're people who have asked before. And like I said, still going to make an attempt to try to get to everybody once. I can't promise that, but like I said, there's the, you know, the rest of the challenge. There'll be plenty of time, plenty of opportunity for Q&A. All right, so Nina, I'm sorry, I keep on like mentioning your name, but then went to Facebook and then took a sip of water. So, but it's another nodule question. I have nodules and originally was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. I didn't submit to treatment and now have symptoms of hypothyroidism, low pulse, weight gain, low temperature. Is this common to go from one to the other without intervention? I mean, I won't say it's common, but a lot of people would, I mean, it depends. Like subacute thyroiditis, which is you know, where someone has hyperthyroidism, that it's very common to become hypo, and usually it's very quick, like within 2 to 4 months. But what's someone who has Graves, so Graves disease is the antibodies associated with Graves are thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, but also a lot of people with Graves have thyroid peroxidase or TPO antibodies, and some also have thyroglobulin antibodies, which are, you know, so TPO and thyroglobulin, those are associated with damage to the thyroid gland. And, you know, so if over time, if someone has all 3 antibodies, let's say, or 2 out of the 3, and you know, they might be predominantly hyperthyroid initially, but then over time, the damage that's taken place to the thyroid can make them hypo. So that's another way. So I can't say, you know, it's, you know, this is common, but it does happen. That's why a lot of endocrinologists say to the Graves' disease patients that, oh, your thyroid will just burn out over time. It doesn't really burn out, but some people, you know, they have antibodies for both, and they, yeah, so. All right, so Denise, I thought this was starting on August 17th. It is. This is not part of the challenge. This is kind of like a pre-challenge, just random, you know. So I just sent a, you know, just yeah. This isn't something part of the challenge. So the actual challenge starts on Monday, and again, everybody who's part of the challenge will get an email about 6 a.m. my time, you know, Eastern time. And so you get an email with the first, you know, the video lesson and the first assignment. And yeah, so it's not, so this is just a random Zoom streaming to Facebook Live. So yeah, you haven't missed anything. That goes for everyone, so. All right. So what could be triggering the problem? Do you consider this a root cause, fungus, herpes, or sleep apnea? Not sure what. I think you have. I think you have Hashimoto's, if I could remember, Denise, because she didn't specify here. You said just what could be triggering the problem, but whether it's Graves or Hashimoto's, obviously everybody is different. So, like in your situation, I don't know exactly. But again, there, remember the 4 categories. So food, if someone has clean, that's a lot of what this challenge is about. Like even, a lot of it is like if someone has already cleaned up their diet. If you haven't cleaned up your diet, then maybe it is something like gluten or dairy. But if someone is eating well, avoiding common allergens, and maybe that, it could be stress, but let's say they're doing a good job managing stress, then maybe it's more, infection related or chemical related, heavy metal related, or again, gut infection or another type of infection. Um, so yeah, again, it's hard to say this is your, or really impossible for me to say for each person on here, this is your trigger. So, all right, Cynthia, I don't know what, you said the I question. I didn't see an I question, but all right, maybe you might want to type it again, just because there's so many questions in Zoom. Maybe this is okay. So there's a natural treatment. Oh wait. Oh, okay. I think I get it. So someone asked about the eye. Okay. So is there a natural treatment to combat the eye issues I'm currently experiencing? Dry, irritated eyes, and someone asked. Someone second that's all. So yeah, as far as thyroid eye, I mean, dryness isn't necessarily thyroid eye disease. And I wrote an article. I've written a few different articles on thyroid eye disease, but I also wrote an article on dry eyes. So inflammation is a common cause of dry eyes. Definitely check out some of my articles on, dry eyes, thyroid eye disease. Immune system is important though. With either one, thyroid eye disease, just like Graves, just like Hashimoto's, it's immune system. So you need to, find, remove triggers, correct underlying imbalances, heal the gut, and that's going to help also with dry eyes, like inflammation. You might need to do other things to reduce inflammation. I'll get more into, especially lesson number 4, specifically about like the inflammatory component associated, with especially like Graves and Hashimoto's. All right, so Cynthia took care of her sleep apnea by losing weight, following keto, intermittent fasting, and getting healthy. All right. All right, so Mark, got my time zones wrong, got in late. Is there a replay? Yes, there will be a replay. So as I mentioned, those who are on Facebook, will be a replay like right after, like that's how Facebook works. And then for those who aren't on Facebook, I will get a replay most likely tomorrow. It is recording, so I need to, download it and, upload it to, yeah, just anyway, but yeah, I will get an email with the replay. All right, so Dan, I have hyperthyroidism and began applying essential oils to my thyroid over a year ago. Got off gluten and went from 10 milligrams methimazole per day to 0. I've been off of meds for 2 months. Only my TSH is out of range. All right, no, that's a great job. Not sure if you have Graves, but if you do, you might want to look at antibodies too. But yeah, some essential oils I've written about the like myrrh, frankincense, especially. Just but there's others as well. But no, great job, and thank you for sharing, Dan. All right, so Cynthia got a biopsy cleared and got them smaller, like the nodule smaller, by losing weight and acupuncture, which is great. All right, so Callie, is it important to know whether my thyroid disorder is due to autoimmunity or not? My doctor told me it's treated the same way regardless, and it has not tested for antibodies as this hypothyroid. So from a conventional medical standpoint, no, because you're right. They're going to treat everybody the same, as you mentioned. That's the same with Graves too. Like if someone has hyperthyroidism, regardless of whether they have Graves or not, typically the treatment's going to be the same. So with hypothyroidism, it's going to be thyroid hormone replacement. With hyperthyroidism, it's going to be either anti-thyroid medication and radioactive iodine, or thyroid surgery. but again, we want to do more than just take medication. So that's I'm sure why you're attending this. Hopefully you're signed up for the challenge as well. But no, so it's not. Yeah, the immune system. Again, Hashimoto's. If it's Hashimoto's, it's an immune system condition, and you want to focus on the autoimmune component. So yeah, I would say if they're not gonna test the antibodies, either go to a different doctor, or depending on where you're located. Like I know if you're in the United States, most states will allow you to you could just test it on your own. Like go to there's walk-in labs, or where you could order online also, and just bring a requisition to the lab. And it's a little bit antibodies could be a little bit pricey, but usually you could get them for less than $100. Sometimes a lot less, but it depends. Sometimes these online places have like sales that you can take advantage of. All right, so Facebook here, I'm going to go back and forth for the next few minutes and then call it a day. So Joanna, is it safe to take carbimazole every time I relapse, or should I do radioactive iodine finally? Yeah, Joanna. So I would, yeah, I mean, I would try to do everything you can to avoid radioactive iodine. I'll say that, but I know it gets frustrating for someone to continuously relapse. So I would get to the cause of the problem, is what many of you predicted. Probably I would say that, because if someone's just taking so carbimazole, again, that's more commonly taken overseas. That's a type of antithyroid medication. So if someone keeps on relapsing, then it's because the triggers haven't been found, or maybe the gut hasn't been healed. So if that's all you've been doing is like take carbimazole, get into remission for a few months or maybe longer, and then relapse again and get back on the carbimazole, and the same cycle over and over again, it's probably time to get to the cause of it. So again, definitely, well, you're in a Facebook group, so I assume you're part of the challenge starting Monday. So is 5 low enough amount of meds to transition to bugleweed? Yeah, 5 milligrams of methimazole is very low. So it would be a lot easier to make the transition to bugleweed with 5 milligrams of methimazole than someone who's on like 20 milligrams or higher than that. Okay, so Renee, you have both. I don't know if you mean both Graves and Hashimoto's antibodies. It is very common, Renee. So, if that's the case, don't feel too bad. I mean, it's, just, having one is, discouraging enough. I know, because again, I was diagnosed with Graves, but honestly, if you have antibodies for both, just yeah, I mean, nobody wants to have multiple antibodies, let alone, one antibody, but, multiple autoimmune conditions. But, just either way, the approach is the similar, similar with Graves, Hashimoto's. The symptom management aspect, of course, is a lot different. And there could be, some triggers are more common with Graves and in Hashimoto's, and vice versa. But, all right, so star, yes, type 2 diabetes. Okay, you put T2. So I thought you might be referring to that. I wasn't 100% sure, but, and then a few people are just chatting here. So, all right, so Pramod, I have not answered a question from you. So I am diagnosed with Hashimoto's, but I have almost no symptoms. My T3, T4 is in normal range. TSH is around 8 though. Was diagnosed more than a year ago. Have not been taking any medicine. Just a few days ago, started feeling quite fatigued, but no cold sensitivity. So yeah, so remember, just not sure if this is the case with you, but T3, T4 could be less than optimal, but within the lab range. And